Hi, everyone. We'll just give everyone a minute or two to join. Okay, I'm mindful that it's lunchtime and most people are at work, so I will make a start on housekeeping and hopefully we'll have a few more people jump in as we go. So good afternoon, everyone. Before we get started, could I get you all to stay on mute, but if you can turn your camera on, that would be great, just so our presenter can see humans, but I understand it's lunchtime and we don't need to see you eating, so that's quite all right as well. I'd like to just remind you guys that this has been recorded as well. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're all meeting from today and this beautiful, cold and hopefully rainy season of Makuru. I'm joining you from Noongar country and I pay my respects to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, the original stewards of this land, and to the elders past and present and the emerging generation of leaders. And I further extend my respect to all First Nations people who might be joining us today. I'm joining you from, my name is Tam Kempton and I'm one of the Sustainable Ag Facilitators with Perth NRM. I'll be your facilitator for today's webinar and I'll field the Q&A at the end. If you have any questions during the presentation, please add them to our chat and we'll get to them at the end. I'd like to acknowledge that this webinar is being delivered as part of the Make Your Hectare Count program funded by the State NRM and the Sustainable Ag Facilitator program, which is funded by Department of Ag, Fisheries and Forestry, WA Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development, and a special thanks to our supporting partners at Five Rivers NRM and the Blackwood LCDC. These webinars are delivered with the intent to support land managers to continue building their resilience through better understanding and response to the challenges and opportunities presented by our changing climate. It is my pleasure to introduce our presenter today, Dr. Meredith Guthrie, climate research scientist with WA Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development. Dr. Guthrie has spent decades researching climate variability and climate change across WA with a particular focus on the Southwest Land Division. Her work includes analysing climate drivers and weather patterns, developing future climate projections and helping industry and communities understand what these changes mean for planning and decision making. Today, Dr. Guthrie will share insights into current predicted climate trends, some practical tools for understanding the weather and what the upcoming season looks like in WA. Welcome, Dr. Guthrie.
Thanks, Tam. So got a fair bit to cover today, so I'll get started. If my computer works. No. Let's do that way. Okay, so this is a slide I've stolen from the Bureau of Meteorology, just indicating some of the climate drivers that we have around Australia. So we'll start here with the Indian Ocean Dipole. So that's obviously in the Indian Ocean. We have something called the Madeline-Julian Oscillation, but that only affects people in the tropics. And then we have ENSO, so that El Niño Southern Oscillation, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then we have SAM, which is the Southern Annular Mode. And all these climate drivers either interact with each other or don't to give us our climate, and that is what we get our weather from. So the El Niño Southern Oscillation, this is the Pacific Ocean sea surface temperatures together with the difference between atmospheric pressure between Darwin and Tahiti, or the Southern Oscillation Index. So these two things have to come together before the Bureau will declare an event, which is what has happened. So these events usually start in autumn and decay the following summer. And there's three phases. There's either neutral, El Niño, which is what we're in at the moment, or a La Niña. So the slide on we're seeing here is neutral, where we get average rainfall in a neutral enso. Typically we get average rain in neutral enso. So El Niño, when that happens, we get really, really warmer waters in the Pacific Ocean and cooler than normal water to the north of us. So that draws the rainfall away from the Australian continent, particularly for the eastern states. Not only does the Pacific Ocean have to heat up quite considerably, we also have to have the Southern Oscillation Index fall below and sustain below -7. And that's what has happened, and that's why the Bureau has called it. Some other agencies like the US will call it El Niño or a La Niña event earlier than us because we have to wait for the SOI to catch up. La Niña is different. So we have much strong trade winds and much cooler waters in the Pacific, warmer waters to the north, and increased rain, particularly for the eastern states. And the SOI has to be consistently above 7 for that to happen. So El Niño, so this is a map of winter-spring rainfall from the Bureau in deciles. So deciles are representative of what's happened in the past. So decile 1 would be the lowest 10% of years in that time period, and decile 10 would be the wettest. So this map is sort of a mishmash of the last 10 El Niño years, not including the last one we've had. And that is indicating, you can see there's very red for the eastern states. So they typically get below average rain. For us in the southwest there, it is indicative of below, but it's not too bad. In terms of temperature, so this other map here is winter, spring maximum temperatures. And you can see here, when we have a El Niño, typically we have warmer temperatures in winter, spring. So this is just a little snapshot of what you can get from the Bureau. And I have to, sort of highlight the fact that every El Niño is different. Just because we've had a drier one in the past doesn't mean this one will be dry. But the general consensus is it is dry rainfall, particularly for the eastern states, high bushfire risk, and warmer temperatures in winter, spring. So on the other hand, we have this other one called La Niña, and that is generally wetter and colder, particularly for most of Australia. You can see on that map on the left there, lots of blue and cooler temperatures as well in winter, spring. The last time we had a La Niña, we actually had 3 in a row. So hit off in September 2020 and lasted till April 2023. We had that particular very wet year, 2022, which some people still remember. That was very wet and very good for growing conditions. Again, this is just a snapshot from the Bureau talking about La Niña. It's very easy to find. Well, it used to be very easy to find on their website, but that's just some sort of highlights you can take and have a think about what it means. Again, every La Niña is different. Just because we had a wet one, like you can see those in the little pictures below, 2007 was quite dry for us. And so was 2022 actually for the southwest, but not every La Niña means wet conditions. Okay, the Indian Ocean. Now, the Indian Ocean does affect our rainfall much more than ENSO because of where it's located in the Indian Ocean. And that kicks off in May and usually lasts till November, although sometimes it can last a bit later. And again, this is 3 different phases: neutral, which is what that little picture showing the Indian Ocean sea surface temperatures there are quite stable. And then we have positive and negative. So in a positive phase, and when you think positive, you think that's a good thing, right? No, not in terms of climate, it does not mean a good thing. So in a positive phase, we have cooler than normal sea surface temperatures to the north of us. And that is with another dipole, with the dipole in the east of Africa is warmer. So that means the rainfall is moved across to Africa in a positive phase. And we technically tend to get reduced rainfall and affects most of Australia. In a negative phase, we have the reverse. So we have warmer waters to the north, cooler to the east of Africa, and we get more rain. Now, we kind of miss out on this rain because this rain is in the form of northwest cloud bands. And so where we're located in the southwest, we sort of tend to see to miss out on these negative phases. Positive Indian Ocean Dipole, you can see here, it does affect most of Australia, and particularly it can affect us in the southwest there. And temperature, this is where it sort of is a bit of a cruncher because we can get quite warm winter spring temperatures, which is can be a problem if you're looking for finishing rains in the spring, and you might want a cooler season and you get this horrible dry finish. In a negative event, you can see that the rainfall is mostly for the rest of Australia, and we do miss out here in the southwest because of the northwest cloud bands sort of skip the southwest land division, and temperature doesn't really affect us. So a negative IOD doesn't really affect us as much as a positive one does. Again, just another little snapshot from the Bureau you can find, and sort of is kind of nice to have if you want to print it out or something, just to have an idea of what that means for us. Now, when these two climate drivers combine, this is where things get a little bit challenging, because these two drivers can interact and the impacts of these two events can actually increase. So you've got the map there on the left, and that's looking at winter spring rainfall when they have an ENSO and an IOD. So that is for an El Niño and a positive IOD. So last one we had was in 2023, and that was a particularly really hot spring that we had. And potentially that could be this year. So the Bureau have already declared it El Niño, and some of the models are actually saying we might have a positive Indian Ocean Dipole hit about September. So that's why it might be a bit challenging this year if we get conditions similar to 2023 when we had a really high temperatures, which led into a really hot summer in 2024. And on the other hand, if we have a La Niña and a negative IOD, last one we had was in 2025. So last year was a pretty good year, but you can see there on that map, we sort of miss out. A lot of the rest of the country get quite wet conditions, and we're sort of average at best. So that's ENSO and the IOD. This is a couple of graphs from the World Meteorological Organization, and they look at 13 different global models, including the one from Melbourne from the Bureau. And you can see they are looking at it. ENSO, the one on the left, that's the ENSO outlook. And ENSO and IOD, you can actually look about 6 months ahead. Now, I have to say that the skill of these outlooks do vary throughout the year. We have something called the autumn predictability barrier. So that's March, April, May, where the skill of the models are at the lowest because ENSO is out of phase and the IOD haven't even kicked off yet. So that's when the skill of the model is quite low. Currently, the skill is very good in winter. And you can see on the graph there on the left, all the models are saying it's an El Niño, and some are actually saying it could be a long-lasting one out to December. The Bureau is actually off the chart there, 3 degrees warm in the Pacific. So that's why you might have heard some things in the news about being a super El Niño or a strong El Niño. That doesn't really mean that will be dry, much drier than usual. The strength doesn't really affect us. The graph on the right is the Indian Ocean Dipole outlook. And so there's some variation in the models are saying about that. Some are saying that it'd be positive quite early on, say August, September. The Bureau is sort of saying we may get a weak one in November. So that's one to watch. There's not much. There is some consensus in the models, but it's not as strong as the ENSO outlook. So that's just one to watch. Again, these outlooks are pretty good because you can forward look at them 6 months ahead, but just be wary of that autumn predictability barrier where school's a bit low. If they're all saying the same thing, however, that's when you sort of pay attention. And they've been, ENSO outlook, we knew from February that it will be an El Niño this year because they're all saying the same thing. So on to SAM. So SAM, that's the southern annular mode. This is the movement of winds and cold fronts around Antarctica. Very important in winter for us. So again, we have 3 phases, positive, neutral, and negative. And again, positive does not mean a good thing for us. So in winter, if we have a positive phase, the cold fronts contract to the pole, and they sort of slide into the ocean, and so we get less rainfall. Esperance actually picks up some more, just the way the cold fronts go. And in a negative phase, we actually get more rain over winter. Now, SAM is a little bit hard to forecast. You can only get forecasted a month at a time. It's not like ENSO or IID. We can have 6 months lead times. And currently is positive, so that's why it hasn't rained in the last couple of days, and it will get to 22 in Perth today. But that'll all change on Friday when we'll have a cold front come through and into the weekend. So this is why in the southwest we have less rainfall, because there is a trend for more positive SAM at winter. Now I'll take you back to 2010. 2010 was a La Niña and a negative IOD year. And so for all aspects, we're probably thinking it might be average to wet, potentially, because that's what the forecasts were indicating. However, we had a really positive SAM. And so what happened was, this is a map of rainfall for June to July in 2010. Below average, it was really, really dry. This is because we had a SAM. So you had high pressure around Australia and lower pressure around Antarctica. So SAM is one of those drivers that doesn't matter what ENSO and IOD is doing, can come over and say, I don't care what you're doing, I'm going to reduce your rainfall. So SAM is very, very important. And if we had a long range forecast for SAM, particularly for the southwest, would be great. I don't know if that's possible, but it would be really good if that would happen. Okay, just a little bit about climate models. I won't get into too much detail here, but most meteorological agencies have their own global climate model. It's a 3D model for the whole globe. It's got atmospheric layers. It's got grids on the side, on the land, in the ocean. It's quite complex. Depending on how far out they go, depends on their resolution. So we might have global climate models that go out to the year 200. They'll be quite big. And then we have the 3-day forecast for the next 3 days, and they're quite small resolution. So the Bureau actually have 4 different climate models depending on what they do. So that's just to get it into your head how they're a little bit different. And obviously the 1.5 to 4 kilometre resolution, it takes a little while to run, and we can't obviously run that out to 2100. So we use that for next 3 days, and we use different models for longer term. So these are the 4, this is a seasonal forecast. So if you go back to the other slide, so the seasonal climate forecast is about a 60 kilometre grid. So it can get a little bit iffy, but it can give us some information about what's coming. So this is looking at the next 3 months, so July, August, September. This map here is from the Climate Copernicus website. They look at 8 different models including the bureaus. And this is one of my favourites, the European Centre of Medium Range Weather Forecast. I think that's pretty good. It's very, skill rate's pretty good for us. And then we've got one for France, one from the UK. And here they're looking at the probability of rainfall in the next 3 months being above median. So what that means, if you look at the colours, particularly for the southwest, it's the probability of about 10 to 30% chance of being above median. So that is the probability of being 70 to 90% below median. So I look at that map and I'll say, okay, the majority, well, they've got 8 models and they put it together to give a sort of a broad brush approach, and they're saying that for the next 3 months it's going to be below median rainfall. It will rain, but it will just be below what we expect for this time of year. The other slide, that is from the World Meteorological Organization. They look at 12 models, including the bureaus, and they've got a very similar outlook. So they're indicating that for the next 3 months, we're expected below average or below median rainfall for pretty much all of the country. You can look at individual models on these sites, and that's what I do, but it's just good to give consensus and say, okay, majority of models are saying the same thing. It's going to be drier than normal. You can click on the Bureau's website. They've got, it's kind of neat. This is just their one access model, which they run 99 times a day. And you can use the little magnifying glass here. I've typed in Bindoon. I looked at rainfall outlook for the next 3 months, July, August, September. And so majority of their runs is indicating decile 1 to 2. So below average, quite below average. In the top, the lowest 20% of year's rain that's what it's indicating. That's what we're getting. And you can see these stars. That means the skill of the access model is very good. You can also click on this little wiggly line here and look at individual months. So you can see here, this is the 99 runs variation. So it's a box and whisker plot. And you can see that some of the runs are saying wet, so that's decile 7 and 8, and some are saying decile 1 and 2, but you look at the median, it's sort of below average for the next 5 months. Temperature outlooks, it's quite frightening. This one is from Climate Copernicus for July, August, September, and that's saying most likely, this is an anomaly map, so this is saying most likely about 0.5 to 1 degree warmer. Doesn't sound that warm, but then when you click on Bindoon for the Bureau, you can see it's in the decile 9 and 10. So looking at very warm in the next 3 months. And that's probably because we've got both the El Niño and a positive ID playing around together. So we can look at what's happening in the ocean. So this is a forecast for August, September, October. This is from Climate Copernicus, and this is looking at sea surface temperature anomaly for the whole globe. So you can see that's really warmer in the Pacific. This is what they call the super El Nino firing up. And they're actually indicating, when you look at all these models together, they've come out with a positive Indian Ocean Dipole. So it's cooler to the north and warmer to Africa. So those two together, dry conditions and warmer temperatures. So that's a bit concerning. And then we can look at the mean sea level pressure as well. So this is August, September, October. So much stronger pressure over Australia. So that will act as a blocking high. So we'll have cold fronts come in, but they'll probably be a little bit weaker and they might get pushed south. And then so that's why there's lower pressure over Antarctica. So that to me is indicating a positive SAM for August. So lots of information available out there throughout the season from DPIRD. So I wrote a monthly seasonal climate outlook newsletter. We've got a couple of tools as well. quite handy extreme weather events tool that can indicate whether or not you've had a frost in your nearby location. Rainfall to date tool is pretty cool. It can track locations' rainfall and compared to deciles and see where you're tracking. Potential yield is more for grain growers. It looks at the French and Schultz equation for yield. And the soil water tool is an estimate of how much water you have in the ground. So there's a couple of things there that you can look at. DPIRD we have 191 weather stations that we look at, lots in the southwest. You might even have one down the road from you. We actually have a new app as well on your phone. That's just a snapshot for Meriden of what it can show you. And there's lots of other forecasts out there. I've pulled out Windy because that's one of my favourites that looks at 4 different global climate models. You can pay for the premium if you want to go out 2 weeks out, but I have tendency to think the forecast changes every 3 or 4 days anyway, so I don't actually look that far out just in case it gives me a false negative or positive. And there's just some tools out there. So that's all I've got to talk to you today. Thanks, Tam. I can stop sharing. How about I stop sharing?
That's okay. You can leave that up there if you like.
Okay, I'll leave that up there.
My mouse just had a little conniption. Thank you. That is incredible. And it is just the interactions are so complex. It's pretty, I know that the bomb gets a lot of flack, but it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, they do. It's pretty chaotic out there.
to know what's happening.
Yep.
If anyone's got any questions, please put them in the chat. I've written a couple of things down. Was that a DPIRD app that you've got there on the screen now? Was that the one that you're referring to with the Meriden data?
That's from the weather. That's from the weather's the website, but you can actually have an app. It's called the DPIRD Weather Stations app.
Okay.
We'll give you something similar to that. I like looking at the desktop stuff because I just get a bigger screen. But yeah, we have 191 throughout the state. And that's the growers find it particularly good. It can give you a decision on spraying. So it takes into delta T and wind speed. So it can actually say whether it's good conditions for spraying, because if you've got an organic farm next to you, you don't want to be spraying glyphosate over the fence. So it can tell you stuff like that. And it actually has a forecast in it as well. And we don't use the Bureau forecast because we have to pay money for that. We use the one from the European Centre of Medium Range Forecast. So it gives you an hourly forecast as well for that location. Wow,
incredible. So without incriminating anyone too much, would you say that long-range forecasts beyond a few days should always be taken with a bit of caution?
Depends on which time of year. So obviously the seasonal outlooks in autumn is a bit flaky because the skill's so poor. But in my newsletter, I look at 17 different models, and if they're all saying the same thing like they did in 2023, that's when I pay attention and go, okay, they're all indicating below median. It's probably going to be drier.
Yeah. Okay. So there's just so many complex interactions going on that things need to be really taken as they come. Amazing. It gives me great appreciation for what the forecasters are actually delivering. Any questions out there? You've been very thorough, Meredith.
All I can say is, good luck, because it's been a fabulous season so far. We had such an early break, and this rain on the weekend should be great. Hopefully it just doesn't get too hot in spring. We don't want that.
Yep. And a hot summer after, potentially.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. And unfortunately, because it's such a strong El Nino, so what happens is all that heat in the ocean gets released into the atmosphere. So that's just going to heat the globe up. Sorry. Just such good news today. So 2026 will probably be the warmest on record for the whole globe.
Wow.
Yeah,
incredible.
can't do much about that. Sorry.
No. Okay. All we can do is be informed and prepare ourselves.
That's correct. Yeah, but just
Yeah.
adapt. And we have
Yeah.
been adapting for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Thank you so much. This will be available to everyone who registered, and we'll share it beyond that as well. Thank you so much, Meredith.
No
That was
worries.
brilliant.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Tam.
Thank you. That was great.
Howdy,
So much
how you going?
information. Oh, he's alive.
I am alive. Just been eating my my sausage rolls that I picked up from the bakery down the road.
Well,
I think I've got chickpeas for lunch.
Thanks, Meredith. Appreciate
All
that.
right.
That was great. I should have prepared some questions earlier, but I was just sitting there thinking, well, at the end of it, I'm going, well, it is what it is, and I think you